There was a time when the world feared the Ottomans. Their banners flew from the deserts of Arabia to the walls of Vienna. For 600 years, sultans ruled over millions, shaping faith, trade, and destiny itself. But behind the glory, something was breaking. Corruption crept through the palace halls. The mighty armies that once conquered empires began to falter. Old traditions clashed with a modern world that refused to wait. So, how did an empire this powerful fall apart? Was it betrayal, pride, or simply the weight of time itself? You are watching Erahive, where history speaks. If you love uncovering the forgotten truths of history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps history alive. The Ottoman Empire did not fall in a single moment. Its collapse began quietly, not on battlefields, but in palace corridors. Behind the marble walls of Topkapi, power turned into comfort, and ambition into fear. For centuries, the empire had thrived on discipline and faith. The sultans once led with strength and vision, but as time passed, their court became a world of silks, ceremonies, and whispers. Ministers bought their ranks with gold. Governors ruled their provinces like private kingdoms. The center no longer held the edge that once united it. The devshirme system, once a symbol of merit and loyalty, decayed. Instead of selecting the best minds and warriors from the empire's youth, it became a tool of favoritism. Wealth replaced worth. The empire that had once rewarded talent now punished innovation. Corruption seeped deep into the bureaucracy. Orders from the capital were ignored. Taxes vanished before reaching the treasury. And while the sultan's advisors assured him that all was well, famine, unrest, and poverty spread across the provinces. The heart of the empire, once disciplined, organized, and feared, was now sick. Its people still prayed beneath the same crescent moon, but faith alone could not heal what leadership had let decay. In the end, the cracks beneath the crescent were not made by enemies. They were made by the empire itself, and soon those cracks would widen, turning weakness into collapse. For centuries, the Ottoman army was the sharpest blade in the world. It marched across continents, crushing empires and rewriting borders. But by the 18th century, that blade had begun to rust. The Janissaries, once an elite force forged from loyalty and discipline, no longer fought for faith or glory. They fought for privilege. They resisted reform, feared change, and turned their power inward. When sultans tried to modernize the army, the Janissaries revolted, burning cities, dethroning rulers, and defending their own comfort instead of the empire. Europe was changing fast. Cannons, rifles, and strategy evolved with science and industry. But in Istanbul, reforms were blocked by old traditions and fear of rebellion. The empire's leaders watched as their neighbors, Russia, Austria, and Britain, grew stronger while their own forces fell behind. Every defeat cost more than land. It cost confidence. The world that once trembled at the Ottoman banner began to see weakness instead of strength. By the time the empire realized it needed to rebuild, it was already too late. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II finally struck back, abolishing the Janissary Corps in what became known as the Auspicious Incident. It ended centuries of corruption within the army, but also erased the heart of the old Ottoman spirit. The sword was reforged, but the fire that once gave it power was gone. The empire could still raise armies, but it could no longer raise belief. An empire's strength is not only measured in armies, but in the wealth that feeds them. For the Ottomans, gold once flowed like a river. Their lands bridged continents, controlling trade between east and west. Spices, silk, and silver filled the markets of Istanbul. The empire stood at the heart of the world's commerce. But time changed the map of trade. When European sailors found new sea routes around Africa, the caravans that once crossed Ottoman lands began to vanish. The empire's ports grew quiet. Its taxes shrank. Its riches turned to memories. As Europe industrialized, the Ottomans struggled to keep pace. Steam engines, factories, and modern banks reshaped global power. But the empire clung to the old ways. Without strong industries, it relied on imports. Without enough revenue, it borrowed. By the 19th century, debt became a chain. European lenders offered money at first as partners, then as masters. The empire's finances were placed under foreign supervision through the Ottoman Public Debt Administration. Even its own revenue, salt, tobacco, customs, was controlled by outsiders. The Sultan's treasury, once overflowing with gold, became a hollow echo of past glory. Peasants paid heavier taxes, merchants lost faith, and the gap between rich and poor widened. The empire still looked grand on the surface, the palaces, the mosques, the ceremonies, but beneath it all, poverty was spreading like a shadow. When the money faded, so did the power. And for an empire built on conquest and trade, trade, the loss of both meant the loss of its soul. But even as its wealth crumbled, something far more dangerous was beginning to rise: the fire of rebellion. Fire. Within the empire, empires rarely fall from enemies alone. Most are broken from within. For the Ottomans, the fire that would consume them began not in palaces, but in the hearts of their people. For centuries, the empire had ruled over a vast mosaic of nations: Turks, Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, Serbs, Albanians, Jews. Each carried their own language, culture, and dream. At its height, that diversity was its strength. But as the empire weakened, it became a spark waiting to ignite. In the 19th century, new ideas were spreading across Europe: liberty, nationhood, and self-determination. For the first time, people began to ask, why should we serve an empire that no longer protects us? Revolts erupted one after another. The Greeks fought for independence and won. The Serbs, Bulgarians, and Romanians followed. Every rebellion tore away another piece of Ottoman land, and with it, another part of its pride. In the Balkans, Christians rebelled against Turkish rule. In the deserts of Arabia, tribes resisted Ottoman governors. Even within Anatolia, whispers of resentment began to grow. The sultans tried to promise reform, equality, rights, representation, but it was too late. The empire could no longer hold together its peoples by faith or by fear. The dream of unity that had once stretched from Africa to Europe was breaking apart, not because its people stopped believing in God, but because they stopped believing in the empire. Each revolt left behind scars, cities burned, families divided, soldiers lost. And yet, with every loss, the Ottomans tried to convince themselves that the worst was over. But the fire within the empire was spreading fast, and soon it would reach the capital itself. The next chapter of this story would bring both hope and ruin: the age of reform. The reforms that broke the empire. As the empire trembled under the weight of rebellion, a new idea began to rise: reform. The sultans believed that if they could modernize, they could survive. If they could make the Ottoman state look more like Europe, perhaps it could stand among them again. In 1839 came the Tanzimat reforms, a bold promise of equality, justice, and modernization. New schools were built, new laws were written, the army was restructured, non-Muslims were granted the same rights as Muslims. On paper, it sounded like a new beginning, a second chance for an old empire. But the deeper the changes went, the more divisions they created. Conservatives accused the government of betraying Islam. Reformers claimed the sultans weren't changing fast enough. Bureaucrats enriched themselves through confusion. The empire was trying to walk two roads at once, east and west, and it was tearing itself apart. When Sultan Abdulhamid II came to power, he promised progress, but ruled through fear. He built schools and railways, yet silenced dissent and filled prisons with critics. His spies listened in mosques, in cafes, even in foreign embassies. Progress had turned into paranoia. By the early 1900s, a new movement rose: the Young Turks. They called for liberty, for constitutional rule, and for the end of tyranny. At first, the people cheered them, but once in power, the Young Turks became what they had fought against: proud, divided, and desperate to hold control. Instead of saving the empire, reform had exposed every weakness. Old loyalties were gone, religion was politicized, and faith in the Sultanate was fading fast. The Ottoman Empire was now a modern state in name, but hollow at its core. And as Europe prepared for its greatest war, the Ottomans stood once again on the edge of destiny. The war that ended an age. By 1914, the Ottoman Empire was a shadow of its former self, weak, divided, and desperate to survive. When the Great War erupted in Europe, the empire faced a terrible choice: stay neutral and risk being carved apart, or join a side and hope for revival. The sultans chose war. They aligned with Germany, believing modern industry and weapons could restore lost glory. But instead of salvation, the First World War delivered the empire's final wounds. From the Caucasus to Gallipoli, Ottoman soldiers fought with courage. But hunger, disease, and poor command crushed them. The empire's armies stretched too thin across deserts and mountains. Each victory cost too much. Each defeat broke another piece of its spirit. In the Arab lands, resentment turned into rebellion. Led by British officers like T.E. Lawrence, Arab tribes rose against their Ottoman rulers. They were promised freedom, but in truth, they were helping carve the empire's grave. At home, famine struck Syria and Lebanon. In Anatolia, men vanished to war while families starved. The empire's leaders, fearing internal enemies, turned on their own people, leading to the Armenian tragedy of 1915, one of the darkest chapters in Ottoman history. By 1918, it was over. The empire's armies were shattered, its cities occupied, its its people broken. The Treaty of Sèvres followed, a cruel map that sliced the Ottoman world into pieces. The once mighty power that had ruled continents was now a prisoner of the victors. But from that ruin, a new voice would rise, one that refused to let the story end in defeat. His name was Mustafa Kemal, and his revolution would bury the old world to build a new one. The last sultan and the birth of a republic. In the aftermath of war, Istanbul no longer ruled an empire. It was ruled by others. British, French, and Italian flags fluttered above Ottoman streets. The sultan sat on his throne, but his words carried no weight. The empire that had once frightened Europe now existed only on paper. In the silence of defeat, one man refused to surrender. Mustafa Kemal, a general who had once fought for the empire, now fought for its people. From the ashes of Anatolia, he rallied farmers, students, and soldiers, not under the banner of the sultan, but under the dream of a nation. The Turkish War of Independence was born. Against all odds, it pushed back foreign armies and shattered the old world order. In 1922, the Sultanate was abolished. The last sultan, Mehmed VI, fled Istanbul aboard a British warship, the final symbol of an empire fading into history. A year later, in 1923, the Republic of Turkey was declared. The crescent and star remained, but their meaning changed forever. The empire of conquest had become a nation of survival. Its palaces turned into museums, its throne into memory. The Ottoman Empire had lasted 600 years, from the rise of Osman to the fall of a dynasty. It had shaped continents, faiths, and cultures, and though it was gone, its shadow still stretched across the modern world, from the Balkans to the Middle East, from architecture to identity. Empires die, but their echoes never fade. The Ottomans fell, yet their story continues, written in every border they once drew, in every people they once ruled, and in every city that still whispers their name. Epilogue: echoes of an empire. The Ottoman Empire may have vanished from the maps, but not from memory. Its heart still beats, in the call to prayer that echoes over Istanbul, in the stone arches of old mosques, and in the languages, foods, and traditions it left behind. From the Balkans to the Middle East, borders drawn by its rise and fall still shape the world we live in. Nations that once fought beneath the same flag now stand apart, yet all carry traces of that shared past, of art, architecture, and belief born under the same crescent sky. The empire's story is a reminder that power is never eternal. Strength fades, borders shift, and rulers fall. But ideas, culture, and memory endure. Perhaps the true legacy of the Ottomans lies not in their conquests, but in their connection, in how they blended worlds and faiths that had once seemed irreconcilable. Every empire believes it will last forever. The Ottomans believed it too. But history whispers the same lesson, time after time. No empire is immortal. Only the stories remain. You've been watching Erahive, where history speaks. If you enjoyed this journey through the rise and fall of one of history's greatest empires, like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to keep the past alive, one story at a time.